everybody. Thanks so much for joining me again on this video today. My name is Ben Clapper, Director of Louisiana Right to Life. Again, on these videos that I'm sharing with you about discussing abortion and pro-life persuasion, I just want you to know that no matter who you are, you're welcome to listen. You're welcome to consider the material I have. This is meant for both pro-life and pro-choice people alike to take a hard look at the issue of abortion, to think about it, consider it. For pro-life advocates, this should help you become a more compelling yet compassionate and respectful advocate. And to those who are pro-choice, I just ask you to listen. Consider what we have to say here. So thanks so much for your time. So this is the second video among a number of videos. In the first video, I talked about what does the dictionary tell us about abortion. And in the process, I laid out that the dictionary tells us that something dies in an abortion, number one. Number two, that if something dies in an abortion, then something must have been living. Third, that there is a human embryo and or fetus involved, which the dictionary defines as an individual human who is developing. So those things were laid out both from a scientific and from a kind of common sense perspective, and the dictionary shows us that. And so it reminds everyone that if you're talking about abortion, you have to acknowledge that there is an unborn human being who dies in an abortion. And if you're to justify or permit an abortion, you have to accept the fact that that's the case, even as you bring about those justifications. So it raises the bar, the level of evidence in a sense becomes so critical, because if we're wrong, if anyone is wrong in their justification for abortion, then an unborn human being who's valuable, who's an individual, dies in the process. So it's important to think about. And that brings me to, as I start, an important thing to take for a moment to think about. You know, if the unborn is not human, this is in my perspective, if the unborn is not human, then really no justification for abortion is necessary, right? If the unborn's not human, why are we even discussing this situation today? You can have as many abortions as you want if the unborn is not a human being. But you know, if the unborn is a human being, in my mind, no justification for abortion is adequate to justify the taking of that human life. It's not going to raise to the level of taking and destroying that innocent human life. And because as I'm looking at it, it's about being consistent. And that's what I want to talk about today. Why it's necessary and critical to be consistent when talking about abortion. For pro-life people, we want to encourage the people that we're speaking with to be consistent in their arguments. If it's going to apply to one human, it should apply across the board to another human as well. Again, presupposing that the unborn child is a human being. You know, legalized abortion in America today is really centered around a distinction or a separation between those humans who are born and those humans who are unborn. Think about it. Federal law does not protect a human being, that is, does not protect a human being until that human is born. So the Declaration of Independence, right, that it gives the right to life to everybody. But in America today, since 1973, since Roe v. Wade, that right to life that right to life is only once someone is born. Now, many people may say, well, this state protects the unborn child at 24 weeks or 20 weeks, but those are state-by-state laws. Federal law does not protect the unborn child. It does not protect a human being's right to life until that person is born. And that's why it's important at this moment in time to think about the gruesome practice of partial birth abortion that was legal for decades in America until 2007, when the Supreme Court said that it was illegal. But the Supreme Court only said that partial birth abortion procedure was illegal. It didn't say that late-term abortion in America is illegal. And so still today, federal law protects the right of an abortionist to take the life of the baby up until birth, and that's why recently New York got rid of their other laws that had protect the baby around 24 weeks at viability. Now in New York, abortions can be done up until birth. So remember, in partial birth abortion, the baby, without trying to get into a really gruesome description, the baby was delivered partially, almost fully, and then the abortion was performed. Of course, the baby's head was left in the birth canal of the mother, and that's in a sense what justified the legality of partial birth abortion. That as long as the head was left in the mother's body, the baby was not granted constitutional rights and therefore can be killed under the definition of abortion. So, since 1973, the born child has been protected, but the unborn child has not. But guys, why this distinction in our nation? What's the big deal about birth that grants someone the right to life in our nation? Does the birth canal somehow grant constitutional rights upon someone? Of course not. That seems ridiculous. Is it because human beings breathe their first air, the oxygen through the air, and somehow that grants them constitutional rights? No, none of that. That doesn't make sense. That somehow birth changes who we are as human beings, so that at one moment we are valuable, or one moment we're not valuable, and the next moment we're valuable. You know, frankly, that line from birth, value from birth to, when you cross the birth canal, is an arbitrary distinction, really, that in no way alters the value of a human being, and I would say is really constructed to protect legal abortion in America. It seemed like a good break, it seems like a good line, and therefore that is what established legal abortion in America today, and since 1973 as well. Now, I would say the overwhelming majority, probably 99% of all Americans, would say that infants, even the day after they're born, should be protected by law, and that no one should be able to walk into a hospital and kill an infant who is just born. Of course, we could talk about a lot of situations of infanticide or things like that. I'm not going to get deep into that, but most Americans, the overwhelming majority, would feel that if an infant was intentionally killed, then that would be wrong, that would be illegal, and someone should be held accountable for that. People would be up in arms about the tragedy of an infant dying. But just a few days earlier, in the womb, that baby could have been killed through a legal abortion. No one would have asked any questions, and the baby would just become a statistic on the number of abortions in America. Even consider that if a baby is born premature in America today, heroic efforts, and they should be, are taken to save and preserve that baby's life, to make sure that they have the health care and the nutrition to support that baby's life, often staying in the NICU for weeks at a time, often costing the taxpayers a lot of money in the process. But we do it because that child, that human being, is valuable and important. Sadly, even in the same hospital in some states, in another room, a baby the exact same age could be being aborted. That doesn't seem to make sense, right? We're not being consistent. Why should where someone lives, where they're located, why should that have any bearing on their value as a human being? It shouldn't have any value on their human being. You see, as humans, our physical and intellectual characteristics can change and develop, whether we're unborn or born, but that never should change who we are as humans. That should never change our value as who we are, and we need to push back against that. Even those of us who are born on this side of birth, right? If people are distinguishing people and separating people based on what they look like, we've seen examples of that in our history, we should not stand for that. We should oppose that, and we should protect the right to life for all humans, no matter what they look like, no matter their physical characteristics, no matter their intellectual capabilities. But if we are at different stages of development, should that endanger our value? So of course, people will say, well, we can. It would be wrong to take the life of an infant, but if the baby's unborn, then maybe they're not a person yet. They're not a human yet. It's not a human. We don't need to protect them. So we have this giant double standard in America, right? where the born are protected and the unborn are not. And it seems to me that there's not a good reason for what I believe is a discrimination against those humans who are just yet to be born. They deserve to be protected. So when we're presented with someone who's kind of making this what I believe is an arbitrary distinction between the born and the unborn, we encourage people to do what we call trotting out the toddler, right? Trotting out the toddler is when we replace, in any justification for abortion, we replace the unborn child who's being killed through abortion, and we replace that unborn child with a born child and say, can we do the same thing in the abortion that we did to the unborn child? Can we do that to the born child for the same reason? So what's an example of this? I'm not on this video going to take every justification for abortion, but I want to take a few and see how trotting out the toddler would apply in those situations. So, at first, it's always important for us to find common ground with the person we're talking to. That is critical because we can, as humans today, as Americans, we can find common ground. So let's say someone says that, many women should be able to have an abortion if they can't afford another child. This is a common justification for abortion that is presented across America today. The idea that if a woman is in financial hardships, she can't afford a child, therefore she should be able to have the abortion and not have the child. Well, we want to say it is, certainly we understand and sympathize with women who may find themselves in economically challenging times when they're pregnant. We acknowledge that this is a serious situation in their life that may motivate fear and concern about what their next step and how they'll be able to provide them themselves. We would not want to say, well, that doesn't matter, right? It does matter, but let's apply trotting out the toddler in that situation. If a woman had a baby 6 months old after birth, so after the baby was born, 6 months old, yet for whatever reason she did no longer have the financial stability that she had had previously when she decided to give birth to the child, would she at that time, based on that dire economic situation, would she be permitted to get rid of or to kill her born child because of that? Well, most of you are thinking, of course not, right? No, you can't do that. The child is born. But we would say, well, what's the difference, right? One child was born and one child is unborn. It's the same situation in both situations. Why the difference? Why the distinction between the born and the unborn? Why do we have different standards for those human beings who are separated only by maybe even just a few months of age? What's the difference, America? What's the difference in those situations? Remember, the pro-life movement, there's this false perception that we don't care about women and their situations and their plight. We absolutely do. We don't question whether the reasons women are looking to have abortion aren't serious reasons or motivating reasons or powerful reasons in their life. As I've learned from women who've had abortions and now regret them, is that they will share that the reason they had abortion was often because they didn't have the support in their life. They felt it was their only choice to make, and so therefore they felt they had no other choice, and so they chose the abortion maybe to get out of what they felt was a helpless situation. And sadly, in many of these instances, it's the man who's pressuring or even forcing the woman to make that choice. That's sad, and that has to stop. We understand that women face enormous pressures with unplanned and crisis pregnancies, and that's exactly why in Louisiana and across America there are so many pregnancy resource centers that are standing by right now to help women in that difficult time, whether it's financial resources, emotional resources, physical resources. No matter what it is, these pregnancy centers are helping to make these decisions, and are going to stand by that woman from when she first comes in through birth, whether she's choosing parenting or adoption, right? They're going to help her through that and give her all the resources and support. The pro-life movement is dedicated to providing those resources to women and that support to women. So it can never be said somehow that we don't care, but it just comes down to the fact that these reasons, though they're powerful, though they're important, they can never justify taking the life of another human individual because of them. If we set up a different standard when the child is born, but then we apply a different standard when the child is unborn, why do we do that? The standard should be the same across the board. You know, Peter Singer, the famous Princeton philosopher, I don't believe and I don't agree with his position. He allows people, he would be okay with taking the life of the child after birth up until 2 years old for various reasons. I don't agree with him, but I respect that he's willing to be consistent in his belief of why abortion should be allowed. But we believe in the pro-life movement that a human's a human, as Dr. Seuss said, no matter how small, we got to protect them all. Let's look at another justification that we often hear. Women should be free to choose and make their own decisions, right? The pro-choice mantra, let women decide on their own. Let them make their own free decision. We certainly respect the right of a woman or really anyone in society to make whatever decision that they want to make. It's just that decision that freedom should stop when it infringes on the freedom and the right to life especially, of another human being, and that's what happens in an abortion. So for example, does a woman, or anyone again for that matter, have the right to abuse their child in their own home? Of course not, right? There's no reason that would justify anyone to abuse their child within their own home, and society acts compellingly to stop and to make sure that children are protected and those who are abusing children are held accountable for that. That should not be allowed, right? But again, what's the difference? Why two sets of values? Why should people not be able to abuse children once they're born? However, we can end the life. We can kill another human being in an abortion for that very same reason, because it's the choice of another person, because it's the choice of the woman in that situation. Again, America, what's the difference? We can't have it, you can't, I can't, we can't have it both ways in America today. Either the human is to be protected, or all of us are vulnerable in society today. Okay, so some people may say, well, I agree with you that we shouldn't allow late-term abortions. I think abortion should be stopped when the child can live outside the womb, and that before the child can live outside the womb, abortion should be legal in America. All right, and that again, that is an opinion that many Americans have, and that's been a cornerstone for many state laws that say that about the 24th week of pregnancy is when abortion isn't allowed, and that's what's called viability, right, in America today. That if a child can live outside the womb through medical means, through technology, then abortion shouldn't be allowed. Now, so again, about 24 weeks right now, give or take, is viability in America today when the child can live outside the womb. But 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, it would have been unheard of for medical technology to keep a child that young alive outside the womb. So what happened? What happened over the past 50 years? Did somehow human values shift? Did the dignity of a person shift over the past 50 years? Should the child of the babies at 24 weeks was it okay to abort them? But at 30 weeks, when the child could be kept outside the womb, would it not have been allowed to abort them at that time? Again, we're not applying our principles consistently, right? When we get into the trap of scientific technology, medical technology, deciding who should live and who should die, who has value and who doesn't, we get into big problems in society. And we get into a position where we can't consistently enforce our laws and protect humans no matter across the board. So again, the justification about medical technology is not consistent because it doesn't stand the test of time, and it doesn't point to a characteristic of the unborn child, because some babies at 24 weeks might be able to survive, some they might survive at 28 weeks, while some it might be 22 weeks. It's not consistent. And again, the danger is that we get it wrong. We get it wrong, and a human being dies in the process who should not have. That's a tragedy if that's the case. All right, some other people may say, well, look, again, I don't believe in late-term abortion. I don't even believe in abortion around 20, 24 weeks. I'm more like early in the first trimester is when abortion should be done. And that's what, again, polling data shows us, that a lot of Americans are opposed to late-term abortion. But a lot of Americans also support abortion early in the first trimester, and that's when most abortions are being done. Somewhere between 8 and 12 or 15 weeks is when the majority of abortions are being done. Again, interestingly, in my last presentation, I talked about the difference, the embryo versus the fetus. 8 weeks is kind of that difference of when they separate the words embryo and fetus, and that's right in the time where the child is a fetus, when really all of their medical or all of their physiological characteristics are present. Just the baby is just having time and nourishment to develop so that they can live outside the womb independently and on their own. All right, so to those who feel that late-term abortion, or even mid-term abortion, if you want to say that, is not good, but early-term abortion would be okay, I ask those people to show me the place where we can draw a line between humans that can be killed and humans who can't be killed. Hasn't that been our problem in our world for generations, for millennia, when we're grappling with that question of who can be killed and who can't? We've seen that through racism, we've seen that through slavery, we've seen that through the Holocaust. We have so many examples when humans treat each other and try to find that line that we can draw to protect some and not protect others. Let's protect us all human beings, no matter what stage of development. Our DNA is what allows us to share together in our humanity, and that should be the basis of protecting. There's no line that can be drawn safely where we can say at 10 weeks or 8 weeks or at 6 weeks or even at implantation, 7 to 14 days, what is that line? Why should the human being not be valuable before or after the line? You see, it's hard to draw that line, and we should avoid drawing that line, because again, if we draw that line in the wrong place, then a valuable individual human being dies from an abortion, and that's a tragedy, just like it's a tragedy that a born child dies in America today. So again, ask you to draw that line. Show me where that line should be drawn, and we can talk about that specific line. And now, human life, for us, for the pro-life movement, human life is a continuum, right? From conception to natural death, right? We did not come from embryos. Each of us once were an embryo. We did not evolve from a fetus. Each of us once were fetuses. And our life was valuable then, and we should be valuable now because we're humans together. If we set up a different standard, then we're going to be endangering us all. So, before I conclude, I want to take a look at one more justification for abortion that is very common in America today, and that's kind of the mantra that people say, my body, my choice, right? Of course, that bleeds a little bit onto the my choice, the pro-choice side, which I talked about a little bit already, but I want to talk about the presupposition that the unborn, what dies in the abortion, is part of the mother's body, and therefore the woman is permitted to have the abortion in that situation. So let's begin looking at the claim of my body, my choice, right? Again, the presupposition is the unborn, whatever it is that's being killed in abortion, is part of the mother's body, and therefore the woman can do whatever she wants. So let's look scientifically. Is the unborn part of the mother's body? That's the first question to look at scientifically. Well, certainly we can agree that the unborn lives within the body of the mother, right? No question there, that the unborn lives within the body of the mother. Again, we know that the unborn is alive, right? The dictionary tells us that, right? We know that abortion kills the unborn, and so the unborn had to be alive in the first place. So we know the unborn is alive in the womb. So the question is it part of the mother's body? It lives within the body, but let's take up whether it is part of the mother's body. So right now, if I'm doing this, there are actually thousands of my skin cells that are falling to their death on the floor in front of me. Now, can I be convicted to mass murder? Of course not, right? Those skin cells have my DNA. They're part of me. They're not a human organism independent of me or a human individual in and of themselves, right? Their DNA is my DNA, and they are a part of me as my greater life, right? As my greater physical self, right? But the embryo, from that moment of conception, has a DNA that's unique and separate from the woman's body, right? It has a DNA that can be shown to be different than the skin cell, than the hair cell, than any other part of the woman's body. It is different than the mother's body. It is not part of the mother's body and therefore inconsequential, such as the skin cell when the skin cell dies. The unborn is different. Now, we know then from the moment of conception that DNA is different as that baby develops as early as 22 days after conception. That baby's heart can beat and pump blood through its little body inside the mother's, living within the mother's body. That blood type can be different than the mother's blood type. That little baby, only 22 days, even before women know they're pregnant, many women know they're pregnant, that unborn baby is pumping a unique blood type, definitely unique blood, but even it can be a unique blood type through the mother's body. I think that's pretty amazing. 22 days. And as of course, from the moment of conception, the baby's gender, the unborn's gender, is determined to be either male or female. And so, of course, as the baby is developing, if it's a baby boy, right, then it's going to have parts of its body that's unique and different from parts of the mother's body, right? So how can we say that the baby boy and the parts of his body are just part of the mother? It doesn't make sense. It's not possible in that situation. So scientifically, we know that the baby is not part of the mother's body, even though he or she may be living inside and just needs nourishment and time so that the baby can develop, strengthen, so that the baby can live outside the womb, right? And of course, adoption's a great option as well. If the mother is not in the position to take care or to care for the child, then adoption's there, and there are couples that are willing and ready to accept and to take that child in and raise it as their own and maybe alleviate that burden that may be on that woman's life right there. Okay, but let's say even in the face of these scientific facts that someone still thinks that the unborn is part of the mother's body. Well, if that's the case, then we encourage that person who believes that to take that stance to its full conclusion. Be consistent is what we've been talking about today. Take that position that you have about a part of the mother's body and take it to its full conclusion. So that means that a woman, when she's pregnant, should really be able to do anything that she wants during that pregnancy because it's simply part of her body, right? So, of course, eating or drinking, smoking, all those things that traditionally in America today we say that shouldn't be done during pregnancy. If a woman is pregnant and she believes that it's part of her body, I don't see why, if that's the case, she shouldn't be able to do all of that. But let's take it even further, to an even further conclusion. What if a woman who maybe has a sadistic perspective and wants to torture the unborn, what if she were to take medications or, maybe not medications, but substances like thalidomide, maybe a medication, that is known to harm or cause malformations in the unborn, so that then when the child is born, after the woman takes thalidomide, the baby could not have fingers, not have toes, be missing a limb, certain things like that. That's proven these days, and thalidomide is strongly discouraged from being used. Even though it helps with morning sickness, it's strongly discouraged from being used during pregnancy because the harm to the unborn child is documented, right? But if the unborn is simply part of the mother's body, why couldn't she take it? Why couldn't she take it even for the purpose of wanting to torture that child? If someone believes that the unborn is part of the woman's body and therefore she can do whatever she wants, then that should be allowed as well, if we're being consistent. But sadly, in America today, people are not being consistent. People on one hand are saying that abortion needs to be legal, yet on the other hand, talking about how we need healthy pregnancies, right? The two don't go with each other, right? Either the unborn is human and needs to be protected and their life needs to be preserved, or the unborn is not, and therefore abortion and all these other things should be no problem. Remember what I said at the beginning. If the unborn is not human, then no justification is necessary. But if the unborn is human, If it is an individual living human being, then no justification is adequate to justify an abortion. So right now in America, Americans protect unborn humans almost sadly in a sense when they want to, right? We throw baby reveal parties in America to celebrate the gender of the baby, that which was determined at conception, right? Even though legally that baby could still be aborted in America. We have ultrasound facilities all over America that are advertising, come take the picture of your baby in the womb. Yet at the same time, abortion facilities won't even show women the ultrasounds within the abortion facility. The double standard in America between the born and the unborn it's just mind-boggling that we could be in this situation today. I'll leave you with this situation. A woman is driving to an abortion facility, or someone's taken her to an abortion facility, and she may be a block from that abortion facility, yet a drunk driver hits her. Sad, tragic. Maybe the mother and the baby die in that situation. That drunk driver can be charged with double homicide in that situation for taking the life of the baby and the mother. Yet she was only a block from the abortion facility where she could have legally taken that child's life for whatever reason, whatever tragic reason that may exist. America, the double standard is ridiculous in our society. We need to protect all human beings, no matter how small they are, no matter where they live. We need to protect all human beings, no matter their level of development or no matter how dependent they are on other people. And we need to come together to support women, to offer them the resources that they need to either parent or place their children for adoption. But we cannot continue this double standard that allows nearly 1 million children to be discriminated against every year through the injustice of abortion. I'll be back in the next video to talk a little bit about answering some common objections or some general kind of things that we hear people say, like, I'm personally opposed to abortion, but these things more apply kind of to that mushy middle of society when it comes to the issue of abortion. I hope you've enjoyed. Thanks for listening.